the episode that is going to be about redemption.
Nigma did way better than I thought they were going to do. I humbly apologize. Top three.
Right. All right, Avery. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Not for Broadcast, the episode that is going to be about redemption. Avery, redemption. All right, before we continue, let's talk about today's sponsor, Battlesmith. It's a fresh take on RPGs, blending crafting with strategic combat and captivating story. You'll forge powerful gear, outfit your team, and lead your custom-built squad into battle. Managing a fantasy workshop and fielding heroes, that sounds familiar to us Dota players, right?
And if you're looking for a game to fill those queue times or cool down after an intense pub match, Battlesmith is your perfect companion. What sets it apart is its depth. You need to carefully consider classes and their gear, unit placement, and when to use consumables. And the best part is that you can make meaningful progress in short bursts, which is perfect for those in-between match moments. Plus, Battlesmith is not just about solo play. You can reign supreme in online PvP as well.
So there it is. Join Battlesmiths on Android, iOS, Mac, and PC to hammer out your destiny. And for our viewers, use code TundraCraft for an exclusive starter pack. Thank you, Battlesmiths, for sponsoring our show, and let's get back to it. You know what I'm talking about?
No, not at all, actually.
Okay, we're talking about redemption from the hatred of the critics, the talking heads who talk shit all the time, you know, while not putting any skin in the game. You know, they just sit back, be online, make some YouTube videos. Oh, these guys are trash. They're not back. They're garbage. You know, these guys can never get first place. Blah, 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 blah. Well, look where we're at now, Avery. Look where we're at right now.
Nigma did way better than I thought they were going to do. I humbly apologize. Top three, right. Not too bad. Not too bad. They looked pretty good. So, I mean, I did not understand that Sumail was drafting. You know, I did not understand that. I would have had more faith. That's all I'm saying. The man's motivated. He's a beast. You know, he's clearly motivated to get some work done. He got some work done. So respect where respect's due. Tip my hat. I tip my hat.
The man sends his apologies to the king. The king himself.
That's right. I do. I know when to send my respects. The king got me. He got me a little bit. There's still some work to be done, but you know, they got some decent work done.
I mean, that legitimately so we had the Snow Rui tournament go on, and Nigma, not only did they end up getting third place, they even took a game off of Spirits, beloved Team Spirits, Avery's beloved team. Boy, you really took some L's on this one, man. They took an
whatever, man.
They lost.
I'll be vindicated. I will be vindicated at TI.
And then they ended up losing in the grand finals to Extreme.
Tactical
Not even
loss.
that close. 3-1.
Tactical loss.
You
don't want to win the tournament before TI. Classic Chinese team mistake, actually, if you think about it. Classic. Chinese team always wins the tournament before TI, never wins TI. So tactical, very intelligent move. You think about it. Very 10-headed move by Team Spirit here. Showed their strength, dominated the event, but then said, "No, you know what? We don't need the dub. We got enough of those back home. We're looking for the big prize in Copenhagen." So
yeah, they dominated the event by losing to Extreme Gaming the upper bracket final 2-0.
Another tactical move. Gave them the confidence to then win the grand final that they didn't want to win.
They go 1-5 against Extreme Gaming.
Tactical, very tactical.
I see. Well, well, it might have been. I mean, that is a tactical win for Nigma moving forward, right? Because they are not going to be at TI. And then placing third place above teams like LGD, G2IG, Navi. You know, they beat Talon to get here. This is a showing that might, you know, whether they keep this roster or get some other people, you know, like what's going on with Miracle, for example. You know, is Kuro actually going to come back? But like just attracting other talent potentially, you know. This Nigma roster shows that they, you know, can put it together when they need to. Sumail, as you said, he went out there to get some shit done. He got some shit done, and now we'll see what happens as a result of all that going into the post-TI shuffle when that happens. But of course, we got to wait for TI to happen and all that sort of thing. I think all of these rosters, Nigma, Boom is another good example of a roster that ended up getting third place, doing very well. But we won't see them for the rest of the year. They won't be at TI. So there's some big question marks, right? They had success, but TI is coming up. Naturally, there's going to be a shuffle. Are these teams going to be shuffling alongside everybody else? So might just help them attract some big names, some big talent.
It's true. I mean, you do well now, you maybe snag a really big snag, and then you're good to go for the next year, or you up your position a lot. Interested to see what One Win will do as well. They are definitely on the rise. The newer generation CIS Dota players right there, continuing to impress, continuing to find some synergy, some cool drafting. Another one of those teams I think that has also shown they can play from behind, which I think is a very good trait to have. Like they're not a team that's just winning all their games in 20 minutes or lose. This is a team that has won some games down big deficits against good teams in a meta where that's more uncommon than a lot of previous metas as well. So that is a very interesting thing about that team. They have a decent amount of resilience, and usually for young and inexperienced teams like that, that's one of the harder things to achieve, is make like deep network deficit comebacks on the main stage and in playoff runs and stuff like that. And they've shown a lot of that. So that team has actually gone up a lot for me in terms of the promise that's there and the potential. Doesn't mean they're going to achieve it all. Could definitely just burn out, but they have shown, they have proven something. They have proven something. They are absolutely on my radar, and they should be on everybody's radar. This is not a team you should take lightly. Like they were on
my radar a long time ago when I called them the new generation of
I think I was a little preemptive. I think as usual, you were a little preemptive there, and you were wrong by a factor of being too early.
I just paid attention to something you didn't.
No, I doubt that. I doubt that. I mean, everybody, broken clock right twice a day, right? So I don't know. Let's not put too much stock in Austin's predictive behaviors here. But I will say, I think now's the time you could say, starting to look like they could be the new generation of CS. That's how I'd phrase that. They could definitely be getting to that spot soon. I'd give it to them.
Okay. Well, yes, we had Elite League that was also going on at the same time as this other tournament, and where our top three was Team Liquid. We managed to get a first place. They actually got to lift a trophy. First time that they've lifted a trophy since ESL 1 Germany. It's been a long time, long time since they managed to pull that off. Obviously, they've gotten first in some other things like DPCs and stuff, and none of it really matters compared to, what a trophy lift is. So they managed to do that. They got first, went to 5 games against One Win, and that 5th game was a very close one as well. Very exciting finals. One Win obviously getting the 2nd place there, and then Boom ended up getting 3rd. The South American team, the Peruvian team, actually manages to show up to the final day of a Peru LAN, which was hype, and they even took a game off of Liquid. So I feel like Elite League ended up getting just kind of exactly what every tournament organizer wants. Within reason, right? Obviously, having the Peruvian team be there in the grand finals, that would be the most ideal thing. But within reason, getting the Peruvian team to the final day is hype as hell. The fact that they take a game off of the biggest name there in Team Liquid, gives the fans, something to be able to cheer for and stuff like that. You get a best of 5 finals that goes all the way to game 5 and ends in a very close game 5 as well.
Sound a little salty, Austin. Sounds a little... like a man who's casted a lot of 3-0s didn't get to cast.
I casted this. I got to cast it. You didn't get to cast it.
It's okay.
Maybe you went to game 5 because I was casting and you are not.
Yeah, maybe some are just cursed men. I'm a cursed man. What can I say? I mean, definitely a monkey off Liquid's back. That's for sure. Is an asterisk though. I will say that. Sure. I'm sure they feel it a little bit. You want to LAN. That is a big deal. It is absolutely a tier 1 LAN win. But they didn't have to play Gaming Gladiators.
Yeah.
They didn't have to play Gaming. So,
yeah.
Is it really getting all the demons out of the closet? Probably not. Probably not. They're still going to have to reface those same demons at TI. And I think they're going to feel that. But it is a big win for them. Like, finally, you clinch it out. I think especially the fact that it went to like a close game 5 helps. If they had 3-0 steamrolled One Win, I think it's actually worse.
Yeah, it would have been just like, oh, well, nobody of any note was there. Yeah. No good competition was there.
We didn't have to try, or like it wasn't a stressful situation. But the fact they won out in a close game 5, it was probably a stressful situation. Could have gone either way. You have to prove that you deserve that win, right? And I think they proved it. That I think is what's actually valuable here for them. Like, a lot of times in Dota, it's not whether you win, it's how you win. And this was definitely a good win for them in how they did it. Whether they felt like that at the time, I don't know. But looking back, I think it will be. And so that'll be a big confidence boost for them going to TI. I think they're still in a very good spot. My stock of them has continued to go up. It goes up a little bit more after this. I'm putting them in like the top 4 for sure, I think.
Okay.
Whereas I had them on that 6th to 8th. So they have definitely done some work in the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly have. The fact that your ranking goes up after Riyadh is surprising. But as you said, you said it last episode, you actually like the way that they were playing at Elite League, and they continue to prove it by being able to clutch out against a 1-win team who, as you said, looks very good. I know Liquid looks at 1 win as being very good. Apparently, that's just one of the teams that they scrim a lot, and they apparently 1 win just bodies them in scrims all the time. So it's a team that they actually lose to a lot. So maybe it does help get some of that, kind of similar to Game of Gladiators, team that they lose to a lot. They managed to triumph over in the end. It was also a test for the coaching team of Team Liquid because Blitz wasn't there. They also had Jab stepping into head coach. So Jabs was doing drafting with 33. And then the biggest test was KP. So they have been looking for a third coach. His Team Liquid is want to do. They've been looking for a third coach apparently since Jarek's left, and KP approached them and they tried him out for Lima. Obviously, it went well, so I imagine you will probably see him joining the squad for TI, unless the players just really didn't value his input at all. But I can't imagine that's the case in a tournament that you won.
I mean, what is their third coach role? Is it just gameplay stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Stuff? So my understanding of the division of labor of coaching is that Blitz is the head coach and he's the drafter, and then Jabs is the prep for the opponents that they're matched up against, and maybe some stats analytics. And then they wanted a gameplay coach, somebody that comes in, specifically looks at the things that are happening inside of the game and says, hey, what about this?
Sure.
So that's what Jarek's did for them at TI11. They haven't had that since. And so maybe
it's interesting also. It's interesting. They did not ask me. That's kind of interesting. A little suspicious.
It's because they don't ask people. People ask them.
Mm-hmm.
That's how KP got the job, is that he went out of his way to be like, hey, do you guys?
Sure, man.
So if you wanted that job, you could have probably asked, and you probably would have gotten it.
We'll see about that one. We'll see about that one. No, KP's a very chill dude.
Yeah.
I know Jack has always sung his praises. He's very well respected in terms of his work ethic, personality, very easy to get along with, extremely chill. He's been around the block, played on a lot of Chinese teams as well, which I think puts him in an interesting position in terms of seeing multiple regions and multiple regional metas and how different teams function. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about this guy in a team environment sense. So I think he would make a pretty good coach. The only part I don't know is like his game knowledge. Where is that at? How useful is it to a team like Liquid, who's probably on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff? And maybe KP hasn't been on a top tier team in the recent years as much as he would like. Sometimes that hurts your idea generation or how much you can bring to a team that already has like really strong thinkers like 33 and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That part I don't know, which isn't to say his ideas are bad, but it's like some people know more than other people in Dota 2, and some people or not even necessarily more, that they value different things. So sure. I wonder if that team will value what he brings in terms of the gameplay stuff, or if it'll clash. But obviously something worked out for them there. And I know as a person and a dude, he's 10 out of 10. So you're not going to have any issues there, which I think is something that team definitely looks for. An interesting pickup. Kind of surprised in a way more of these big name teams haven't expanded their support staffing.
Yeah.
Like these Team Spirits, Gaming Gladiators, BB Team. Who else is up there?
The teams that have the money to be able to support having
like these are
multiple staff members.
These are wealthy orgs, and putting another $50K in for the year to get an analyst or something is pennies on what you're spending on a team, right? You're spending $3 million on some of these top tier Dota teams a year. To hire an analyst or something on top of the $3 million for another 50, like, it's irrelevant compared to potential upside. But I think it's also a product of a lot of these teams, because they're so top tier and they're winning. They don't trust, like, they don't value other people's ideas or think they could be that valuable. It's like, what are we missing that is going to help us get another 1% right? Or who do we trust to bring that to the table? Like, do we trust some random analyst dude without a track record? You know, maybe if like Puppy came to our team, okay, like, maybe you trust him more or less, I don't know, but you would at least have that discussion. But if it's like a random analyst, I think a lot of these teams are kind of wary of bringing people into their environment, because you're also teaching someone a lot by default. Like, that's the byproduct of bringing in coaches and analysts, is they're going to learn from you no matter what. And it's going to go on their resume, and they're going to go to the next team, and likely it's going to help them a lot, which is their incentive to do it. It's their biggest one. And so you have to get something out of that exchange, and that's not the guaranteed part. So it is
not all risk. Information and input is good, right? Like, sometimes people bring bad ideas and even, you know, convince you of their bad ideas and, you know, lead you down the wrong path. So, you know, actually valuing the person that's coming in is pretty important.
No, bad coach can ruin your team. Absolutely. Not even just because they're bad, but if they're a bad fit, they can absolutely ruin players. And it's hard to know. You got to gauge that as best as you can. But still, I'm surprised. Maybe these teams do have more analysts and stuff. They just don't talk about them. They're not public. I'm sure they do have some. But yeah, the second, third coach ideas, it's a weird one. It is a weird one. It's like, part of me does think it's too many chefs in the kitchen to some degree, even if they're detailed out and working on different things. I understand that concept, and I think it fits in a lot of professional team structures and systems. But in Dota, you'd have to come to a point where you all agree on certain ideas and go with them and believe in them. And I feel like the more people you throw in there with the position of power to sway that, it becomes harder and harder to get there. Or you have to have people that are really willing to be aware of that and step back, even if they think they might be right, just for the greater good.
Another team that I want to talk about is Boom, who did get again third, and they had a strong performance. They took down, they went through, they took down made a lower bracket run where they beat their interregional rivals in Beast Coast. They 2-0'd them. That was easy for them. They go on to face Nouns, lose the initial game, end up winning the next two. Then they 2-0 Execration, who Execration took down OG to get there in that spot in the first place. And then went up against Liquid and lost a game there, but definitely showed, I think, some pretty good stuff along the ways. And it is kind of, again, they're in that awkward position of like, there's no TI. So what is this roster exactly going to be doing? But, you know, the South American rosters have not been showing up lately until Boom, because Heroic, you know, kind of didn't perform as well at Riyadh, bombed out of this tournament, that's for sure. But Boom stepped up and took their place. Did you watch any of their games?
I did. I think that team is, I mean, it's Parker, right? Like, that's the team. Let's be honest. No disrespect to everybody else on that team, but I think Parker is the most interesting South American player in a long time. This is a guy who had one of the worst pub track records of all time. Absolutely despised, incredibly toxic for years. Probably still is to some degree. This guy has more enemies than, you know, the devil himself in some ways. It's interesting that suddenly he's definitely improved a lot. That is absolutely for sure. This guy has gone from a pub ruiner to, I don't want to say a world-class carry yet, but like, if you're going to pick a carry right now who's on the up and up and has some raw potential that you can like believe in, I might take him in like the top 3, you know? And so not top 3 carries. I'm saying like top 3 of that category of a carry. And so that has to be said, like the improvement has been there and people are impressed by that and they see it and they respect it. Dota players always respect improvement and skill. And I wonder how that weighs with his past personality problems and craziness and toxicity, and how many people would be willing to play with him versus not, you know, what is he like now in a team environment? Has that part improved? I have no idea.
I mean, just, you know, like in general, do you want to work along somebody who has "fuck off" tattooed on his fingers? You know, like
Look,
most people across human civilization would be like, yeah, that's probably not somebody I want to be in a work environment with.
Like when you go into this, you have to ask yourself, do I want to win? And if you want to win, what are you willing to do to win? And who are you willing to work with? And what are you willing to take in terms of shit and toxicity and whatever? At the end of the day, if the guy's the best carrier you're going to play with and he's going to win you games, then you make the other things work, right? Like that's what it will come down to for a lot of teams and players. I will not vouch for his personality. I don't know that, good or bad, but gameplay wise, the guy is definitely explosive. Like he's insane. He plays like an absolute psychopath. He has good traits for the carrier role. He farms incredibly fast. He joins fights. He's aggressive and he plays to win. Like, this is not a guy who's going to sit back and lose a game because he's 0-0-0 at 50 minutes, right?
No,
I don't think he's going to be the guy that's like TPing out of the fight in the middle of it because he doesn't want to lose his KDA. Like this is a guy who's going to go in and he's going to try and win you the game every time. So I think that Boom team is doing well because this guy is just, man, he is on the up. There's no way around it. He has exploded in the last year or two. It's interesting to see. I don't know what will happen in his career. He's an extremely volatile personality and player, which can be really powerful. It can be really detrimental, depending on which way it gets harnessed. But it is interesting. He's a very interesting and fun player to watch. And that part, I think I'm curious to see what happens, you know, what develops about this guy more than Boom. Like he's the more interesting part of that to me. What happens to him?
And especially what international prospects might get, you know, somebody might pick him up from one of these Western European teams. I mean, OG has already taken, you know, 2 South American players and fit him to the roster, and maybe it didn't work for this year, but still pretty decent team, though they did not perform well at this tournament. I don't know how much of that is just the Seb being gone, but they flopped when it came to playoffs for this event, because I think they were one of the teams I was kind of expected to actually go in and, you know, make it to the you know, top 3 at least the final day. And
I feel like it's a motivation thing. Like,
yeah,
they just don't have anything to play for right now.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And they've played a lot throughout the year. I think it's probably a situation where they're a bit tired, a bit worn out. They've been playing all year. They've had to work through shit all year. It's been a lot of up and downs for that team, a lot of stand-ins, a lot of turmoil. And now you're at this point where it's like the big tournament for them, EWC's gone. You're not going to TI. What are you really looking forward to in the short term? Like, I feel like people probably just want to break, you know, hard place to play and hard mindset to try and do well on LAN. And so I don't really blame him for this one, but I do think that team will likely make some kind of change here in the next few months, or try and do some sort of change after TI, or someone's going to get poached. I don't know who's super high up on people's priority, but something about that combination of players is working, but not powerful enough to punch through these top tier teams.
We kind of already talked about Shopify. Same deal with them. You know, it's another team that likely is, you know, going to be looking different at the next year. So that kind of wraps up the 2 tournaments that happened. Both of them were kind of done by some community coverage. Like I covered the Elite League on my channel, and BCOP covered the Chinese tournament on his channel. There was Artur and Gorp and our Cryptic, who are also covering the Elite League as well. And I was curious what your thoughts were on that.
Oh, you mean working for free?
Yeah.
My thoughts on you working for free with other co-casters was... Oh,
I had a great time casting with Stormer and Arteezy. These sure pro players, man, are great.
I'm sure you did. You're just living the life out there, you know. It's okay. I got some guys on speed dial too if I have to, you know, bust them out.
yeah. How many play-by-plays are there?
Got AC on speed dial.
Okay. Sure.
What do I think? I mean, I don't know. We've discussed it before. I think that whole community cast thing is a double-sided sword. Like, it can be good for your individual promotion, and if you have some brand value to go on, and it's nice to get extra Twitch viewership for your channel and stuff like that, but a lot of it feels kind of fake. Like, it's not going to be viewership that stays around after a tournament's done, right? It's not like you're gaining a huge amount of consistent following. I feel like you make money off it, but you kind of make what you would kind of get paid to do it normally anyway, for most people. Maybe slightly more, slightly less. I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on it, man. I feel like there's just this hole in the Dota ecosystem right now in terms of the financial ecosystem that these events should be a bit more stable and able to make more profit, and therefore take some of that profit and turn around and do more consistent production, hire people more consistently. But it's just in a weird space with Valve pulling out, and now it's kind of just run by betting sponsors. So like, I have no idea, dude. I don't know if this trend's going to continue. If we're going to see more and more community-based casting because betting sponsors don't really have incentive to host like huge studios and productions, which makes sense. And if that's the case, then there's probably ways you can take advantage of that more, I guess, as like individual talent like us, or if you're trying to be an up and comer, right? Like if you're more on the independent side, someone like B-Cop or R Cryptic or whoever, I could see it being good for them. It's a lot more exposure, a lot more even playing field in a way. But I don't know, something about it's weird to me, man. Like I do feel like at a certain point, these tournaments are basically getting people to stream their event for free, giving them the viewership that they would normally have to pay to get. Am I like wrong on this? Or there's like something missing there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so for people who are wondering why this has happened, why this has developed, basically, when it comes to tournament organizers that are in English, right? You build up a tournament, right? You have sponsors for it. Part of it is just baked in that you have an English broadcast, right? Because that is your primary language. That's the tournament that you're building it around. So it's all kind of baked in. But for a tournament organizer that is not English focused, right? So BetBoom is a big one. Anybody who's going to be working China or Russia, right? Their focus is not building up an English broadcast. It's not baked into building a tournament for them. For them, it's a side thing that usually in the past, what has been done is they give that coverage to a partner of theirs. Now, what that is given up for exactly has changed over the years. Some tournament organizers have asked for money to be able to give you the broadcast rights for you to be able to have the English broadcasting rights. You would have to pay money for that. Now, right now, if you want the Russian broadcast rights, those are worth a lot of money because there's a lot of sponsorship behind the Russian broadcasts. So as a result, if you are, in this case, Elite League, ESB, and you have a tournament, you are not building it around English, you're building around Spanish. You have these various languages. You have Chinese, you have Russian, you have English. You can sell the Russian broadcast for a lot of money. The tournament organizer actually gets money by giving the Russian broadcast to somebody. They probably get the same for China. Probably not as much, but my understanding is the Russian broadcast rights are worth a lot. They probably get something for China. English, you don't get any money. In fact, you have to spend money in order to get casters to cover your event, and you have to work to try and get a sponsor. There's nobody to give it to right now, right? There is no studio. There is nobody out there. Nobody is out there to give the English broadcast rights to. So then you have to do it yourself. You have to try and
give it to
sell.
me. By the way, they want to give it to me. That's okay. I'll take it.
You have to sell the English broadcast yourself, and obviously the sponsors and stuff that you have for the tournament and for the Spanish broadcast. You can't just like double those up and be like, oh, we'll throw you on the English too if you give us twice the amount of money. That's not the way it works, right? So they oftentimes are, sometimes that works for some sponsored, but like, oftentimes this is just an entirely different like sales thing. And particularly if that's not your forte, right? If you're not English, you probably don't have connections to, sponsors that are going to be willing to give you money for the English speaking broadcast. So if you don't get those sponsors, then you are just paying money out of pocket in order to have an English coverage provided. In which case, why are you paying money, and why not just give it away to the community and they will handle it themselves? So that is the basis of why this problem has propped up. And where we go from here is the big question mark, right? What exactly do we do from here? How does this get fixed? the entities that were in place in the past, like studios, as an example, are no longer in place and probably are not viable in the first place. So it's not like necessarily that studios are just going to pop up because of this. But you do need some sort of entity that exists that has the ability to sell English broadcasts to sponsors. We need something like that, because otherwise this will just continue. For every non-English speaking tournament organizer, they're just gonna hand it out to the community, which, you know, it has its own pros and cons, but I think more often than not, there will be more cons than good things for it. There will be games that just don't get covered, for example, and that's just not a good thing, right? That's not a good thing for the English Dota audience. So, you know, something's got to change, and I just don't know what exactly that change is going to be. And whether it's, you know, again, thing like a studio or an agency, or if it's some sort of, you know, if it's going to be streamer based, right? If Koifa or Gorp or, you know, those guys are going to, you know, RTZ going to put more into covering these events and then therefore sell on them. And then if they get money for them, they can in turn pay other people to do, you know, more coverage, right? Gorp covers one game and he pays some casters to cover the other game in the group stage or something like that. You know, I don't know what exactly it's going to look like, but something's going to change off of this.
I just don't think any individual tournament in terms of the streaming numbers for them is actually that valuable. I just don't think it really matters to like most sponsors, which is why most sponsors don't exist in the English broadcasting, independent of like big organizations like ESL or something, because you can't go to Monster Energy and like sell them, or Intel and sell them on like, hey, I got a tournament and I'm going to get 1 million viewer hours. Like, okay, cool. Well, it doesn't fucking matter in the grand scheme of things, right? Like they want a product that is stable and exists for a year, or ideally 2 to 5 years, right? And they understand you're going to get this many average hours over these many events every month for X amount of time, and bring people back and see this consistently.
Which is where studios provided some sort of consistency, right? Like if you Monster, you know, you sponsored BTS and their studio, then every broadcast, you know, you're showing up there. And then also the studio themselves had the connections of like, hey, we're, you know, there's this tournament. Oh, and we're doing this tournament next month, and so on and so forth. So you had this like kind of revolving door of like, you know, a connection at least that you had formed that you could keep going back to, of like, hey, you know, 20K for this, 20K the next month, so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's also, a studio can provide a bit more endemic advertising to the product as a whole. Like when you pay a streamer, they can slap a logo on the screen. They can put a Monster fridge in the background. They can give you a shout out or whatever, but that's kind of it. A studio can make specific content. They can run more deliverables. They can put some of that stuff into the scenes more organically. They can even name events. Like you can be a title sponsor, right? That's very different than a streamer rebroadcasting an event and being like, oh yeah, I'm streaming, and by the way, like Red Bull sponsor me this week, as opposed to like, hey, we are having a Red Bull Invitational is the name of this tournament. It's going to be on every social media. We have big channels with big, right? There's a huge difference between those things in terms of what you're getting your money for and what the brand is getting in terms of people recognizing it as something that is contributing to the scene, or maybe getting more growth or invested in Dota itself, as opposed to like, this guy is just some mercenary representing a brand that decided to pay him a lot of money that week. That's like a big hurdle. So I do think there's a space that's missing for that kind of thing in the English Dota scene right now, but it's kind of tough to fill. It's like a chicken egg thing. Like you need sponsors to make those like small type studios viable, and the small type studio needs to be viable in order to go get the sponsors. So it's like, you can't really do anything right now. People just aren't willing to throw money into these things unless you have a consistent track record, or you can at least make a proof of concept, and that's really expensive to do. So I think it's just kind of stuck where it is. And influencers are cheap, they're easy, they're malleable. If it doesn't work, you can just cut the contract and leave. It's like very low risk for potential decent reward. Unsurprised that a lot of the scene and, you know, internet in general is going that direction in terms of content and branding and all of that. But I think it's in theory should be sad for the average viewer. Like I think the average Dota viewer should want something like this English studio to exist over random freelance streamers just picking it up casually, because in theory it's a better product. Like I know people talk about the old Beyond the Summit studios and stuff like that, and I feel like those were good products and people enjoyed them. Obviously people can go watch Gork or whoever. It's a different product. It's fine. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but like I think there is a decent audience that likes that kind of thing and appreciates it and would watch it. Whether it's enough to make it economically viable, I don't know. But I think it's sad that we're in a space where that can't happen anymore, and it's kind of been lost. And in theory, the pieces are still there for it to happen, but you have to kind of reinstill faith of sponsors to come in and support a project like that. And there's very few people who could probably get that to happen.
Yeah, particularly in the bit of esports winter that we're in, sponsorship and stuff in general is just hard for esports. So that's why so much of it is gambling money, because that's the only sponsor that's there. Speaking of money, we have the question for the week, and I thought this was a fitting question since we're already on the topic of money. Going back a little bit for this question, Janku5639 asked the question: how many pro players do you estimate are making a living out of competing in Dota 2? I mean, as a main source of income. Doesn't need to be getting filthy rich, only enough to pay the bills. And then he has a part 2 of the question, is adding all of the people that make a living out of Dota, streamers, content creators, pros, talent, etc. How many do you think there are?
So how many pro players are making a living?
Yeah. So I think the base of this question is people are interested in, obviously, all the tier 1 pros. They're making money, right? They're all making crap tons of money. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
How far down the list do we start going where people are still making a living out of Dota, and how many of them are just grinding at the hopes of being able to get the big money?
Probably more than you think. I mean, obviously living is dependent on where you live. Cost of living is a huge factor. Yeah. Obviously you're going to get your salaries relative to how expensive it is. Like your salaries in Southeast Asia or South America are going to be lower than North America or Europe, but not necessarily for everybody. Some of those players do get paid a lot. Western salary levels sometimes.
Yep.
So that is one factor, but outside of that, I think if you are a Dota player and you have gone to LAN at any point in a given year, you're probably getting enough to live on. Now, I'm not saying that is anything crazy. All right, we could be talking 30 or 40K a year in salary. But to me, that is enough to live on in a lot of places in the world, right? On average. Is it enough to live on in America? It's like, I think that's close to the federal minimum wage, right?
Yeah.
I think it's technically livable, but like you're not doing great by probably a lot of people's metrics in America, right? But I think outside of if you're living in crazy cities, there's a lot of places in America where you could easily live on that. I feel like that's kind of the benchmark here. I think there are a lot of players who are making at that level if they've gone to like one LAN within a year. If they're on any sort of sponsored team, I feel like that would be the lowest yearly salary I would expect. And on average, it's probably higher. Like you're probably looking at 50, 60K a year for lower tier players, even if they're not necessarily going to all these big LANs. I think Dota is just expensive. So I feel like most players, you can actually earn a living if you're at the pro level. But if you're
actually
outside
picked
of that,
up by like a decent org,
yes,
halfway
if
decent
you're
org,
on a org that's not sponsored, you're just on a casual team, then you're basically making nothing, right? There's a really hard cutoff at some point. So those guys are making nothing. But if you're wearing a jersey with something on it, then you're making, in my opinion, at least 30 or 40K. And if you're making less than that, then it's one of those things where like, yeah, I mean, I know of cases where players make less than that when they were playing in DPC, like tier 2 DPC teams.
I'll give you an
stuff.
example. Like a team like Apex Genesis, right? They're like the third best North American team, which means they never go into LAN. They're only showing up for these online qualifiers, but they are a part of an org. I do wonder like how much those guys make,
Yeah, not
they're
that
obviously
much.
getting something, but
that's a different situation because it's kind of an individual guy running that.
Sure.
And it's not a big company or anything. It was an interesting story, but Yeah, that's a different situation, but that's why I would point to, that's not a team where those players are going to land during a year, really.
Yeah.
And you're in like the most dead region of Dota, so that there's not too much you can expect in North America anymore outside of like now in Shopify in terms of salaries.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any anymore, actually. But yeah, I think like all these European teams and stuff, all these tier 2, tier 3 European teams, you're making a living. I mean, the issue with it is, like, you could say, well, that's not too bad. Like, let's say I make 50K a year playing professional Dota. That's pretty good. You're getting paid 50K a year to play video games. Like, it's pretty good compared to a lot of normal jobs, right? But the issue is it's not comparable because it's not equally as sustainable. Like, Dota esports could disappear in 2 years. You could disappear in a year or two and never get on another good team. Like, these things happen, even to top players. It's very volatile and very uncertain. So it's not like you're making 50K a year working a desk job that you're probably going to have for the next 10 years as long as you don't fuck it up, right? Which I'm not saying those jobs are 100% that secure, but generally they're going to be more secure than playing Dota 2. So that 50K is like, okay, I can plan around it more. I can do more with it. I can see the long-term potential. If I'm making 50K in Dota, like, okay, yeah, I'm living, but like, what happens if that disappears tomorrow? Then I'm just fucked, right?
Yeah.
And so it does not feel good. Like, I think you have to be making
the time you have sunk
amount.
into it, nothing valuable is coming out of it.
Exactly.
After the money is
you
gone.
can't really translate that to any other job or anything. So it's a real sunk cost. That's where I feel like if you're going to play pro in Dota, you kind of have to be making like 150K plus, I think, to justify how it feels, because you may only have 2 or 3 years of making that 150K and then you're like out on your ass and then you got to find something else to do in life. And at least then you have some saved up money and you can go from there, and the sunk cost isn't as bad. But, if you spend 5 or 6 years to get to a point where you're making 70K a year, like, does that feel good? Not nearly as good.
And what I've noticed with a lot of these pro players is that I was actually just having this conversation this morning with Hopid, was that the players, because they went, they made that transition of teenage to adult, having this purpose of playing Dota. What normally happens in that period of time, that's usually the period of time where you go to college, and a lot of people are like, don't know what they're doing, sort of thing. They're like, I don't know what I want to do in my life. Don't really have that direction. Well, you had purpose before. Now you're getting out of Dota 24, 26, 28. You're right back to that area where it's like, now I don't know what my purpose is. And very often that means that you need a couple years to kind of like figure yourself out. So it's not just like, oh, I'm starting my life at, whatever time you quit Dota, because now now Dota is no longer your purpose and you have to find something else that gives you, that direction in life. And that can take a while for some people, particularly if you are maybe averse to discomfort or, anything like that, because Dota treated you well, right? Dota was, you were playing video games and like anything that kind of bothered you in some ways, there was somebody to deal with it. And all of a sudden now you have to, you never had to, do a 9 to 5 or anything like that. You don't want to live that life because you didn't have to live that life, but so you're going to be resistant to it. But
I mean, I can tell you
where life is going to lead you at some point.
I can tell you 4 or 5 years into my pro career, I absolutely had the idea in my head that I would have instantly quit and left the Dota scene if I didn't feel I had prospects beyond just playing.
Yeah.
Because I felt like it was not worth the risk. And for me, I did. Like, I knew sitting there is like, okay, if playing doesn't pan out or I get to a point where I'm not getting paid enough to play, then I'm going to go coach again, which I'd had more success at. Or I'm going to potentially become talent at some point, which I felt like I had a decent shot of doing. Not guaranteed, but I had scouted it out a little. I was like, I feel like I would at least get a chance to do it. Maybe it doesn't pan out, but I had a couple backups like that, right? And I was like, okay, worst comes to worst,
you have
some
degrees.
other things.
I feel like you're just forgetting about the fact that there are a lot of players who just don't have any college, right?
But the thing is, that was part of my thought process as well, is like, the value of those doesn't last forever. Like, those engineering and stuff it's based on your job experience a lot and your resume and that type of thing. Like, me having a degree from 6 or 7 years ago is not that relevant when I'm applying to. I mean, it's relevant to some jobs. I'm not saying it's useless, but it's not. I can't just go instantly become a top tier engineer again. I'd have to like kind of restart or work way or go back for a master's. And, you know, it's probably the better way to do it. Like go back for a master's and then go something from there. And you can kind of restart that process, which are things I considered. But then again, you're like weighing that against the opportunity cost and how much you've sunk into this and you don't want to give it up. But if I felt like I didn't have any of that stuff, right? If I was just like, I was a player, no coaching resume, no speaking ability or potential to become talent, it was like player bust, it might have swung me to just be like, this is kind of fucked. You know, I'm just going to go to like med school or try and go to med school or something like 26, you know, because then I still have time to do that and like make it work. Whereas if you're like 30, it's definitely harder from a mental standpoint to make that call or like feel like you can just start your life over again. Like you can, but I always tell people it's harder.
Yeah.
You know, people act like it's easy.
So another reason I pulled up this question is that because, you know, doing this coverage of Elite League, I am not making my day rate. I am not making my series rate of like covering these games, right? What I'm getting out of the games is whatever the community gives me, basically, right? Mostly through subs, sometimes through ads, right? Playing ads and stuff like that. And what I found was that after a day of doing it through subs, I made less than my series rate. So I covered, 3 or 4 series, and what I would normally ask for to cover one series, I made less than that. Now that's not taking an ad revenue, which is another thing, but in the question of people making a living out of Dota that are not pro players, one thing to note in this regard, like ad revenue, is that Dota 2 as an esport is not particularly because ad revenue in particular, because a lot of viewers are Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, places that ad revenue does not actually give you that much, then the return in that regard. So you can have 6,000 viewers, right? Hit the play ad button. What you're going to get out of that versus, just regular Twitch.tv streamer who has 6,000 streamers, it's going to be very different.
Oh, yeah.
As is like things like sub rate and all that sort of thing, right? So
it's really hard to monetize stuff in Dota independently.
Yes, Dota is notoriously hard to monetize. The community is hard to monetize for sure.
I mean, I guess the second part of that question was like who outside of the pro players is making a living. I feel like it's only talent that are working more than half the events of a year on average, I think you can probably get away with a little less, but like not easily. Like
if you're not working LAN events, then you need to be working like every single qualifier, and that is a grind, and you're probably not making I think we, like Dota Talent, have done a good job of establishing pretty good rates, both for LAN rates, but I also think the remote rates are pretty decent that they've gotten up to. But it's still going to be a grind if you're keeping that up. YouTube has been notorious about the fact that what you get out of YouTube is a lot less than what it used to be, and you have similar ad revenue problems there, right? If a lot of your viewership comes from some regions of the world, it's just not worth as much, sadly. So that's just YouTube. YouTubers. There's only going to be a handful of people who are really making that kind of that money, that full-time yearly salary kind of rate, right? And that's going to be, Noob from UA, BSJ, Jenkins, yada, 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 right? There's going to be those guys. If they get sponsorships now, that's where like you can actually, especially if you get any sort of like gambling sponsor or something like that, that's where you can actually make a lot of money. But a lot of people just don't have sponsors, right? So if you're purely basing it off of YouTube revenue, it's probably not going so well. It's probably not going great.
Yeah, it's tough. There's not a lot of people that make a good living off Dota. The ones that do make a living make a very good one, which is where I think it kind of gets biased. Of like people look at it and go, "Oh, these guys are making millions of dollars," but you're looking at 1%. It's just not. I also view it in terms of like we get paid very well for what we do, and I don't take that for granted. But I also view it as something where like most people who got here spent a lot of years to get there, and a lot of those years getting paid basically nothing.
Yeah.
And that averages out. Like, you can't just ignore that part of it and be like, oh, if some guy, it's the same for players. Like, if some player makes $500,000 in a year, you can't just be like, oh, like he's absolutely made and set, and like ignore the fact that maybe he spent 4 years making like 20K.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
or
you average
straight
that
up
out.
working for free, right? A lot of talent or pro players grinded on teams for free. As you said, if you didn't have an org, then you were not making any money.
And then maybe that guy the next year makes 100K again because he got kicked off a top team, right? Like, yeah, there's definitely some players there's a lot of Dota players that are multimillionaires. Absolutely. And I'm not necessarily talking about those, because I think if you're at the top 1% in anything that has money in it, you're going to be fine. But there's a lot of players that like have certain years they do really well, and they have a lot of years it took to get there they didn't do well. And if you probably average out all of their career earnings and everything over a 10-year period, it's probably fairly comparable to most, 100K jobs you would get if you went into like a tech in America or tech in Europe or something like that, which is kind of the economic environment I'm talking about. Obviously, again, this varies wildly depending on your cost of living and where you are in the world. So I'm not saying that's not a lot of money for a lot of places, but it's all relative. But I think a lot of those situations, it's not as crazy as people think. And the very top is maybe crazier than people think.
Yeah.
And I think talent are like in the middle. Like, I think talent get paid very well now, and we should be appreciative of it. But I also know a lot of talents that did spend a lot of years to get here that didn't make a lot. So again, you're in that situation. If you average it out, it's not like you were just making $1 million every year for the last 10,
Yeah.
It's just very, it's very weird.
I'll always go back to the fact that I casted a LAN for, I casted Starladder with Toby. I did it remotely. And I did it entirely for free. Like, I did not get, Join Dota didn't pay me a single bit for covering that entire weekend. Toby went to Ukraine. He covered it there. He had me being his co-caster remotely. And, I didn't make a single cent off of doing that coverage, and that was something that at that time is just kind of like that was expected. Co-casters didn't really get paid at all. It was just entirely, you just did it as sort of a hobby / exposure sort of deal. And then maybe it turns into something later on, which in my case it did. For many people, it did not. I spent a lot of time working at Join Dota, working with co-casters that did not get paid. And they spent, a lot of them spent a lot of time working with me and never got anything out of it. I spent a lot of time giving games to, like when I went to Join Dota, like I pitched, actually paying the community casters, which was something that BTS was doing. And Join Dota was not. And I made the pitch. I said, hey, here's how much we're making off these Twitch channels. We can pay these guys. I think I was paying them at the time $10 a game. That was the, I think the break even point was like $14 was like if we give them $15 a game, then we're actually going to lose money. So we can give them $10 a game, and gave gave a lot of games to a lot of casters who some of those guys were workhorses. Some of them are actually still around all this time, and they casted a lot of games for not a lot of money, and it never turned into anything. They did not end up breaking through, and never got them to that point where, you get invited to LANs, and that's where you really start making money. But so, yeah, there's, I think there's also I'm saying on top of the amount of time that you spend, there's also the failure rate, right? Where it's like, there's a lot of people who just never get to make any money. Oh, yeah. And that's another big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I'd rather have systems that kind of like pay people out for taking the risk and investing in something that they enjoy doing and trying to make it work, and they get rewarded at the end. I feel like that's on average better than just a lot of the systems that pay people now for scamming their way to the top or fucking other people over. Like, there's just so many bad ways that current economic systems pay people out that I feel like this one's, it's not up there near the top of what I've seen. Definitely has its flaws and whatever, but like, I don't know. I'm okay with talent and players making maybe more than people think they should if they've put in years of work and taken the risk to try and get that reward, Now, if the debate is like, should this entire esports ecosystem exist in the first place? Should be people getting paid for this stuff at all? I don't know. That's another debate, with the way the world's going. And we're not going to debate all of that. I'm not saying that necessarily, but I'm just saying Like,
I mean, there is obviously a product of some sort at the basis of all the bullshit that surrounds esports. Ultimately, it is something that people want to watch.
Yeah, it's entertainment. And like entertainment can generate some money. It's not up to me to decide whether there's money that's supposed to be there or not. If they're willing to pay it, I'm going to try and get as much as I can because I put a lot of years in this game and I want that to feel fulfilling. Like that's another part, you know. It's not just about the money. It's like you want to feel like you actually are getting rewarded for the work and effort you put into something to build a craft or get better at what you're doing. And then the money should be there to reward or incentivize people to do that. So like, I don't know. You can't complain when people put 10 years into becoming an analyst or 10 years into becoming a coach or player, and then they get paid a lot to do that. And then just be like, oh, this guy's like super overpaid. You know, why don't you go get a normal job? And it's just like, because I don't have to risk 9 years at a normal job not getting paid to maybe get the pay. Like, you know, if I went and became an engineer or an accountant, I'm not working at one of those firms for 10 years. And 8 of those, I'm not getting a paycheck with like, yeah, don't worry, man. The last 2 are going to be like really good, you know? You know, that's like what we call internships.
There's no risk of your employer just not paying you, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely your company just doesn't exist like next year at all, you know? Like it can happen. I'm not saying there isn't risks in these other stuff, but like it's a lot different. So, or even in those situations, at least you can take that and then use that as as part of your resume to get another job, you know?
Yeah.
Which happens a lot. Like even if you were fucking Lehman when it collapsed in 08, like those guys all went and got other jobs on Wall Street. They're like, I worked at Lehman. Oh, that's great. You know, it's like, you can't do that in esports a lot of times. Like I can't go and just be like, yeah, I was talent for these guys. And then some other game is just going to be like, oh, okay, we'll hire you now. Like, you know, who do I go to? I can't go to John Esports and submit my resume. So like, there's some lost value there too that has to be compensated for. So I honestly think it's like in a pretty fair spot. I think there's some extremity at the top, but I think talent wise, I actually don't think it's that insane. I think we're actually in the reasonable zone right now.
Yeah. But just to follow some of your previous arguments, you would agree that I should get paid more than you?
For what?
For all, I put more time than you have into this.
Why? You did get paid more than me for a decent amount of time, and I was okay with that.
But I've still put in more time, so I should still be making more money than you.
But see, that's the part I disagree with. I think you put in more time strictly as talent, but not into Dota. And see, this is where I think I was happy to take. So I took less than you for about 1.5 years or so because I think there was an argument there of like, I'm new and I have to prove myself as talent, and I don't have as large of a talent resume. I did not expect
this to be a full discussion. I thought this was just going to be a cheeky joke.
And I think there is a lot of fairness in that. And I think I also had to improve that craft as much as I could too. So me as a talent was not as valuable as you as a talent. But I think at a certain point, to be an analyst in Dota 2, especially as an ex-pro player, like you can't say that I did not invest 7 or 8 years as a pro player to learning this game and how to talk about this game and provide ideas to this game that doesn't translate to my job as an analyst. So you can't just like devalue that and be like, oh, he's only been talent for 2 years, which,
well, I'm just saying, how many years have you been in Dota?
10 at this point, right?
I've been in there more than like 17.
Okay, well then you can get another $50. Like, I don't know what the fuck you want from me, you know? Sure, I don't think there's an argument against. I mean, that's how most of like traditional sports casting works, right? Longevity counts for a lot. Seniority, like I mean, that's how most jobs work. Like, you should just get raises over time because otherwise you're losing to inflation anyway. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know, but yeah, I feel like talent's in a pretty reasonable spot, honestly. And I think players are still getting overpaid a bit. It's still in a little bit of a bubble, I think, in terms of player salaries and what's reflected in those, and especially with how much is still in the total prize pool in a given year for players to win, which is still very high in Dota compared to a lot of other games, right? I think Dota players should be very happy with what they're getting right now. Very happy. And if they're not,
and what about editors? Do you think editors should get being paid more?
Oh yeah, I'm constantly advocating for editors to get higher pay raises. Every discussion, you've heard it. You know that's true. I always advocate. It's true. Always advocating for the back end. I think that's maybe the one side of esports that probably doesn't get paid as much as they should, honestly. So yeah, always there.
All right, guys. Thank you for your question, by the way, Janku. And if you guys want to ask questions on the show, we have a backlog, but we're always adding more questions. And sometimes I just slot it in based off the conversation that's happening at the time, like this one. So if you guys want to ask us a question, let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, blah, 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 blah. All that sort of deal, because, you know, we want more views for the videos so we can continue to make you content. Thank you for watching.